Once upon a mundane morning, Barb's day got busy without warning. A realtor in need of an open house sign. No, 50 of them, and designed before 9.
My head hurts.
Any mighty tools to help with this plight?
Aha!
Barb made her move. She opened Canva and got in the groove.
Bulk creating Canva sheets. Create 50 signs fit for suburban streets.
Done in a click, all complete.
Sweet!
Now, imagine what your dreams can become when you put imagination to work at Canva.com.
This October, the Wrong Station celebrates a decade of dread. You can read the show notes to discover terrible new ways to celebrate with us. Today's episode, The House of Shells, is written by Alexander Saxton and performed by Abigail Turner.
On one of the rainy streets of their hometown, there was a house completely encrusted in shells. Some were small as the head of a thumbtack. Others were great conches the size of your liver. The fence around the front yard was encrusted, and the gate and the pergola encrusted, and the window frames were crowded out with shells, and the mossy dwarf oaks inside the yard were hung with strings of barnacles that swayed and clacked on the cool sea wind. As adolescents, the two of them would sometimes sit in the scratched and slanting bus stop across the street. It was a sleepy town. There wasn't much to do besides sit there and drink coffee and speculate and watch the rain run down the spiraled grooves of the shells. "I wonder who owns it," he asked her. "I've never seen anyone come in or out. Do you think it's abandoned?" "It can't be. You see that conch at the top of the arch?" It was the color of a blushing cheek, and its chalice overflowed with rain facing the sky. "I see it." "It wasn't there last week. Someone's been adding shells this whole time, little by little." "Oh." He'd always seen the house as a kind of barnacled wreck. Now he realized it was a living reef, growing grander and more poignant each year. But when he said that, she shook her head. "No, it's a fortress or a prison." She leaned forward over her knees. "Someone in there's building their own shell to keep the world out. Or keep themselves in." He looked at her out of the corner of his eye. You always notice things that other people miss. He was trying to sound nonchalant. He was motioning toward the idea that he loved her. "That's me." She laughed off the compliment. "Misperceptive." She was motioning toward the idea that she couldn't love him back. Rebuffed, he closed up a little and brushed the hair out of his eyes and jerked his chin at the house of shells. "I wonder who owns it?" he asked again. He was letting her know that the moment had passed, and that they could get back to their game. "Oh, probably a pirate." Her tone brightened. "He came home from the Black Ship and needed to hide his treasure. So now he goes down to the water every day and picks up a new shell, and he hides a single jewel or gold coin inside. That way, when the crew finally tracks him down, they'll ransack his house but never find the treasure. Because the house is the treasure. Smart. Very smart." She grinned back at him. "Just don't let him know we know." He leaned back against the scratched plastic. "I think it's just a rumor that he's a pirate." "Oh? Then who is he? He's a sailor. A sailor who went to sea and fell in love with a mermaid. All right, then what's with the shells? Well, that's just it, he told her. She was the kind of mermaid who's a woman from the waist up and a shell from the waist down. She scoffed. That's not a real thing. What, mermaids? No, obviously mermaids are real. Shell mermaids are something you made up. You just don't understand the sea. She blew a raspberry. You'll see, he told her. Someday, I'll sail around the world and capture one. And you'll fall in love with her and build a house like this. He shook his head. This mermaid loved the sea too much. She wouldn't come ashore. That's why he built the house this way, so that any time she comes to the surface, she can see he's still thinking about her. She thought about that for a moment. The rain came down. You know what? She said abruptly. It's probably just some crazy guy. He laughed. Well, what drove him crazy then? Isn't it obvious? She mimed an object going through her forehead. Harpoon accident? It was one of the last long afternoons they spent together at the bus stop. Shortly afterward, she started seeing someone, and it broke his heart. And he resented her, even though he had no right. Rather than bring up his rejected love or let it go, he held it tight as a grain of sand inside an oyster. He grew cool toward her. They drifted apart. The house of shells lay unwitnessed in the rain. When she moved away for university, he stayed. He never went to sea, but he worked and paid his way through the world, and took up smoking, and had brief, unmeaningful affairs. He found a conch in a rag and bone shop and bought it. It was the color of a blushing cheek, and it lived alone on a shelf in his room. From time to time, he'd stop and lay a hand on its coarse, cool surface, while he looked out at the rain on the sidewalks outside his apartment. The next time he saw her was after she'd finished her master's in the capital of a bigger country. She worked a prestigious job in that city now, the kind where you wore stone-gray suits and clean white shirts. But when she came home to visit, she dressed as she always had before, in soft cardigans, in colors of the sea. I heard you were back in town, he said when she turned up at the bar he managed. Just for the holidays. He had come into his own these days and was confident. He dressed in clean black shirts with the sleeves rolled up. We should get a coffee while you're here. She said, Of course. The next day they met at an old cafe and walked together down the rainy streets of their adolescence. Eventually the rain thickened and they took shelter under the scratched plastic of a bus stop. Remember this place? Oh, God, of course. The Shell House. I can't believe it's still here. Shell House makes it sound so small. I think of it as the House of Shells. La-di-da. Who do you think owns it? She laughed, remembering the game they used to play. Probably belongs to a squid who made it big in real estate, she said. Retired to land. I think it belongs to a pervert. His thing is shells. She scrunched up her face. Too believable. They saw each other a few more times before she left town, and again when she returned to visit her family in the summer. He began to dare to hope. You need to tell her how you feel, a friend told him. One way or the other. You've been carrying this for too long. This winter, he said. When she comes back this winter, definitely then. When she returned that winter, it was like spring had come. The hard rime of the sea felt like warm mist. The sharp wind was a cool hand on his cheek. They met on the pier for a walk along the beach. It was bitter cold. The waves boomed and the wind glittered black sand with diamonds of ice. She hunched into her coat. Should we turn back? Instead, he bent, finding something half buried in the grit. Look, a shell. He held it out. Would you like it? He was motioning toward the idea that he loved her. But she kept her cold fingers clasped underneath her arms. We could add it to the shell house. She was motioning toward the idea that she couldn't love him back. Please, he tried to sound nonchalant. The house of shells. Together they made their way to that slouched and now abandoned wreck of a building. When they pressed their shell into the white rod of a fence post, it was the first one added in a long, long time. He said, There's something I need to be honest with you about. Uh-oh. I have really strong feelings for you. She hesitated. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know the truth. She slipped her arm through his as they walked back through town, but it was a consoling gesture, nothing else. It was nice to see you, he said as they parted at her parents' house. Let me know when you're next in town. I will. He walked around for several hours after that. He invited his friend over for a beer, and they arrived at the same time. By then his lips were blue, and the frost had aged him gray. Well, his friend told him, it's sad, but for the best. I suppose so. Now you can move on. Of course. Absolutely. An awkward silence fell. That's a nice shell, his friend said, reaching for conversation. There was a whole shelf of them now. Thanks. I've started a collection. That spring, her parents moved away, and so many years passed before she next returned to the rainy streets of her hometown. By then, she'd risen in her career, and no longer had to wear the stone-gray suits, the white shirts. She could dress as she pleased, and so she returned to soft cardigans, to colors of the sea. Her hair, and her husband's, had elegantly turned to gray. They both looked like they fit in that seaside town with rainy streets. At a place she'd once known, they stopped for coffee, and then wandered on until the rain picked up in earnest, forcing them under a shelter at a scratched-up bus stop. There used to be the most amazing house right here, she told him. It was covered in shells. A hoarder? Her husband asked. We never knew. We always used to guess what kind of person lived here. Probably a sea witch. She went home after eating all the children. She smiled a little, but didn't feel like laughing. The loss of the house had made her sad in ways she didn't fully understand. Wait a minute. He stepped out into the rain. A house of shells, you said? Her mouth twisted. Just a shell house. You sure it was right here? Of course it was. Why? He took her hand and pulled her out into the rain. Hey, look! At the end of the rainy street stood a house encrusted with shells. Some were small as the head of a tack. Others were great liver-sized conches. There was a shell-studded fence around the yard, and a gate and a pergola encrusted. And the window frames were crowded out, and the green dwarf oaks inside the yard were hung with strings of barnacles that swayed and clacked upon the wind. Who do you think built that one? Her husband joked. A pirate? A sailor who fell in love with the sea? But she wouldn't play. Instead, she shivered and drew her coat around her shoulders. Come on, she said. It's getting cold. Let's go back to the hotel.
The Wrong Station is made possible with the generous support of our listeners on Patreon. Join us today at patreon.com/The Wrong Station for bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes content, ad-free listening, and additional goodies celebrating our decade of dread. The Wrong Station is co-produced by Alexander Saxton, Anthony Botello, and Jacob Duarte Spiel, with music composed and performed by Alon Citrin, and arranged for the viola and performed by Viola Schmidt. You can follow us on social media at The Wrong Station, or email us at thewrongstation@gmail.com. And until next time, thank you for listening.